You know the record exists. You even know where it is. Maybe you found it in a county probate index or spotted a reference to your ancestor's baptism in a German genealogy database. You can practically see it. And then you stop because you don't know who to email or what to say. Or for a foreign archive, you don't know how to say it in their language. Here's what most genealogists don't realize: archives respond to emails. A well crafted email to the right address gets you records that no search engine will ever surface. And today I'm going to show you exactly how AI helps you find that address, write that email, and send it in perfect formal German, even if you've never studied the language. Let's dive in. Welcome to Ancestors and Algorithms, where family history meets artificial intelligence. I'm your host, Brian, and today we're talking about one of the most underused skills in genealogy: reaching out directly to archives by email and actually getting the records you need back. We're living in 2026. Every serious archive in the world has an email address. Courthouses, church archives, state repositories, diocesan libraries, they all have one. The records you've been stuck on for months are often one well written email away from landing in your inbox. The problem has never been the archive's willingness to help. The problem has been knowing what to write, how to find their email, and for foreign archives, how to write it in their language. AI solves all three. Today, I'm going to show you exactly how, with copy paste ready prompts, you can use tonight. So let's get started. Let me paint you a picture. You've been researching your family tree for years. You know your way around census records, family search, ancestry. You've tracked your family across state lines and ocean voyages and name changes. And then you hit a specific kind of wall. Not the frustrating kind where the records don't exist. The almost worse kind, where the records absolutely exist, and you can even find a reference to them online, but the actual document is sitting in a courthouse or a church archive that you've never contacted. I know some of you are nodding right now. You've been there. The probate index entry is right there. The case number is right there. You can see that your ancestor's estate file was filed in 1893 in a county courthouse, and that file probably contains his will, a detailed inventory of everything he owned, the signatures of every heir, and the names of family members you've never found anywhere else. It's all there. One email away, and you haven't sent it. Or maybe the barrier feels even bigger than that. Maybe you've traced your family back to a village in Bavaria, and you know the Catholic Church kept baptism records going back centuries, but the thought of emailing a German archive feels like a mountain. What do you say? What do you ask for? How do you say it in German? Does a German archivist even read English emails? Here's what I want you to hear before we open any tools. Archivists respond to emails. That's what they do. They exist to preserve records and to help researchers access them. A clear, specific, respectful email gets results. The barrier has always been crafting that email, not the archivist on the other end. And that is exactly what changes today. We're going to work through two real scenarios. First, a U.S. courthouse email request for an original probate file that only has its index digitized. Second, and this is the one that's going to open up your research in a completely new direction, finding the right German church archive, finding its email address, and then drafting the request in formal German, even if you've never studied the language. Before we open any tools, I want to plant a flag here. AI is your research assistant, not your researcher. When we use AI to find an archive's email and draft our correspondence, we are using it exactly right, as a research and drafting partner that helps us communicate more effectively than we could alone. You still need to confirm the email address is current. You still need to verify the information in your message is accurate. The AI gets you to a polished, professional email in minutes. The verification is still yours. A brief word on the genealogical proof standard before we start, because it's doing real work underneath everything we do today. When you email an archive for records that aren't online, you're executing GPS Element 1, a reasonably exhaustive search. You're not stopping at the edge of what's been digitized. You're pursuing the evidence where it actually lives. And when you log the archive's name, email address, and your correspondence date in your research notes, you're executing GPS Element 2 complete and accurate source citations. Future researchers, including the grandchild who inherits your work, will know exactly where those records came from and how to reach back to the same source. All right, let's start with the scenario most of you will hit first. Let me introduce you to George Alcott. George died in 1893 in Highland County, Ohio. You found him in the County Probate Index, available through a local genealogy society resource. His name is there, the case filing date is there, but the full probate packet, which could contain his will, a room by room inventory of his farm and household, the signatures of every heir, the names and residences of relatives you've never located, that packet is in a file cabinet at the Highland County Probate Court in Hillsboro, Ohio. The index entry exists online. The file does not. George left behind a farm and 5 children, and one of those children may be your grandmother's grandmother. Without the file, you're assembling the story from the outside. Most researchers look at this situation and think, I'd have to drive there, or hire someone local, or just give up for now. What they don't think is, I should just email them. The Highland County Probate Court's email address is clerk@hccpc.org. That address is publicly listed on their official website. An email sent this afternoon could have a response by the end of the week. But before drafting a single word, I ran the strategy session in ChatGPT. Because before you write any email to any archive, you need to know what you're asking for and why. Here's the exact prompt. Quote, I need to send an email to a county probate court to request original genealogical records. The ancestor is George Alcott, who died in 1893 in Highland County, Ohio. I found him in the County Probate Index with a case filed that year. Please help me think through. Number 1, what specific document should I request from the complete probate packet and why each one matters genealogically? 2, what information should I include in my email to help the clerk locate the records quickly? 3, what should I say about fees, payment, and how they should respond to me? 4, what mistakes do genealogists commonly make in these requests that I should avoid? End quote. What comes back from this brainstorm is exactly why the strategy step matters. ChatGPT immediately flags something most researchers miss. There may be 2 separate record streams for the same estate. The original loose probate packet with all the filed documents, and a probate minute book or will book where the court copied key documents into a bound volume. A vague email that asks for any records you have on George Alcott might get you only one of those streams. A specific email that asks for both is twice as likely to surface everything. The brainstorm also surfaces the reminder to include the case number from the index if you have it, to name the specific documents you want rather than leaving it to the clerk to decide, and to ask clearly about fees, per page copying costs, and how they prefer to receive payment. With that framework in hand, I took the strategy to Claude to draft the actual email. And here's the principle that determines whether your email gets a same week response or gets stuck in a pile. Specificity is courtesy. An email that says, quote, I'm researching my family and would like any records you have for George Alcott around 1893, end quote, puts the work on the clerk. An email that says, quote, I am requesting the complete original probate packet for George Alcott, Highland County Estate case filed 1893, including all loose documents, will, if any, inventories, accounts, receipts, petitions, and the final settlement, as well as any will book or minute book entry for this case, end quote, tells the clerk exactly what to pull and exactly what to look for inside it. Claude builds that specificity into a professionally formatted email ready to send to clerk@hccpc.org with a clear subject line, a brief introduction, a precise records request, a fee inquiry, and your contact information. That's GPS element 3 in a records request. By asking for the complete packet rather than just the will, we're setting up the analysis and correlation that happens after the records arrive. The will tells you what the person wanted to happen. The inventory tells you what they actually owned. The receipts tell you who was still living and where. Together, those documents carry a far richer story than any single one. Subject lines deserve a moment here because they are your first impression and they determine whether the email gets opened today or filed for later. Claude's subject line for this email looks something like Genealogy Records Request George Alcott Probate Case 1893. Clear, specific, professional. The clerk reads it and immediately knows what this is and where to route it. Now, for the scenario that is going to open up a completely different class of research for many of you. Let me introduce you to Karl Vogel. Karl was born in 1858 in the small Bavarian village of Kalmunz, located in the Upper Vals, the upper region of northeastern Bavaria, about 32 kilometers northeast of Regensburg. He immigrated to the United States sometime in the early 1880s. By the 1900 U.S. Census, he is listed in Ohio, birthplace Germany, naturalized. His naturalization papers name his birthplace as Kalmunz, Bavaria. You want his baptism record. That document establishes his parents' names, his exact birth date, and the names of his godparents who were often neighbors or relatives, another research lead. It is the foundation that lets you push the German research back another generation. Here's where most researchers make the first mistake. They go looking for the Standesamt. The Standesamt is the German civil registry office, the government body that records births, marriages, and deaths. For records from after a certain date, it is exactly the right place to look. After a certain date. Here's the fact that changes everything about German genealogy research. Civil registration, meaning government recorded births and deaths, did not become mandatory throughout the German Empire until January 1, 1876. Before that date, in Bavaria, records were kept by the churches. Catholic parishes maintained their own registers of baptisms, marriages, and burials going back in many cases hundreds of years. Karl Vogel was born in 1858. That is 18 years before Bavarian civil registration began. There is no Standesamt record of his baptism because the Standesamt didn't exist yet for that purpose. His birth was recorded in the parish baptism register, the Taufbuch, sometimes called the Tauf Register, maintained by the local Catholic Church. This is GPS element 3 before we have even opened an archive. Analysis and correlation of the evidence. Understanding what records existed in a specific place and a specific time is what prevents you from spending 3 weeks emailing the wrong office for a record that cannot possibly exist there. This is exactly what I asked Perplexity to sort out. Perplexity's strength is current web research with citation, and for a question like, which archive holds those specific records and what is their email address, you need current, verified information. Archive structures change. Email addresses change. As of June 2026, when I ran these searches, here's the correct information. Here's the prompt. I am researching a Catholic ancestor born in 1858 in the village of Kalmunz, Bavaria, Germany, in the Oberpfalz region, approximately 32 kilometers northeast of Regensburg. Please answer, 1. When did civil registration begin in Bavaria, and what type of record would document a Catholic birth in 1858 there? 2. Which archive or repository currently holds the Catholic Church records for the Oberpfalz region of Bavaria? 3. What is the email address for that archive, and do they accept genealogy inquiries by email from private researchers? 4. Are any of these records available to view online for free, and if so, where? End quote. What comes back from this perplexity search teaches you something transferable to any international research scenario. Perplexity confirms the 1876 civil registration cutoff and explains why. The German Empire unified in 1871, and civil registration followed 4 years later as part of a standardizing the new nation. Bavaria had always maintained excellent parish registers because the Catholic Church had been keeping them for centuries. It identifies that Kalmunz falls within the Diocese of Regensburg, which covers the Oberpfalz region of northeastern Bavaria. The record-holding archive is the Central Diocesan Archive of Regensburg. And here's the detail that makes this a 21st century workflow rather than a 20th century one. The archive has a published email address. Their own official website states that registration by email is required to use the archive, and they explicitly provide written genealogy research responses on request. This is not an archive that makes you guess at a contact form. They want your email. Perplexity also surfaces that Regensburg church records are available to browse for free on the Matricula Online platform at data.matricula-online.eu. Let me put the golden rule into practice right here. AI is your research assistant, not your researcher. Which means, before emailing any archive, spend a few minutes checking whether what you need is already viewable online. Searching Matricula for Kalmunz might show you the scanned pages of Karl's baptism register at no cost, and you might not need to email at all. But here's where the GPS standard pushes further. If you need a certified copy for a formally proven genealogical conclusion, an image you viewed on a screen needs to be followed up with a direct request to the archive. The archive provides those copies. The email is how you ask for one. And it's also how you ask what it costs, because the Regensburg archive does charge fees for its genealogy services. Now, about language. The archive staff are expected to be able to communicate in English, and an email in English will be understood. However, an email in formal German signals that you've done your homework and respect the archive's professional context. In practice, it gets faster, more thorough responses. Which brings us to where Claude does something genuinely remarkable. I want you to take a moment to appreciate what we're about to do. Before AI, crafting a formal email to a German diocesan archive meant knowing German formal email conventions, knowing the correct terminology for the record type you were requesting, knowing how to ask about fees in a way a German administrative office would recognize, and doing all of it in a language most English-speaking genealogists don't speak. Most researchers stop there. Not because the archive wouldn't respond, not because the records don't exist, because the language barrier felt too high to clear. Here's the prompt. Quote, please draft a formal email in German to request genealogical information from a German Catholic diocesan archive. 2. info@bistoregensburg.de, archive name, ancestor details, name Karl Vogel, approximate birth year 1858, birthplace village of Kalmunz, Oberpfalz, Bavaria, record type sought, baptism entry. The email should have a clear professional German subject line that identifies this as a genealogy inquiry, follow German formal email convention with a standard salutation and closing, explain that I am conducting private genealogical research, request information about whether a baptism record exists for Karl Vogel, born approximately 1858 in Kalmunz, ask whether they can provide a certified copy and what the fee would be, provide space for my name and email address for reply, please provide the complete German email first, then a full English translation directly below it, end quote. And there it is. a professional German email. Directly below it, the full English translation so you know exactly what you sent. I've spent years doing German genealogy research personally, and looking at that email, the structure is right, the terminology is right, and the tone is appropriately formal without being stiff. A German archivist reads it and immediately understands. This is a researcher who knows what they are looking for, has done the preliminary work, and is making a focused professional inquiry. Now, here's where the golden rule closes the loop. AI drafted that email. Before hitting send, I verified two things: that the email address was still active for the Regensburg archive, and that Carl Vogel's 1858 baptism falls outside the archive's 120-year protection period for baptism records, which means it is accessible. Both checks take about 90 seconds with a quick Perplexity search. Those are your checks, not the AI's. The email is polished and ready, but verification before sending is always your responsibility. That verification step is GPS element 2 in practice. Correct source citation starts before the records arrive. It starts when you confirm that you're emailing the right institution and that the record you're requesting is legally accessible. What we have done across this episode is something I want you to feel the scale of. We use ChatGPT to think strategically before drafting anything. We use Perplexity to find the correct archive for the correct records in the correct region and to surface its email address. And we use Claude to produce professional email correspondence in two different languages and two completely different institutional contexts: a U.S. probate court in Ohio and a Catholic diocesan archive in Bavaria. 3 tools, 3 focused functions, and 2 emails ready to send, both of which could have responses in your inbox within days. Before I send you off, let me give you your homework. This week, make a list of every record you know exists somewhere but you haven't been able to access. Index entries with no corresponding file. Archive catalog entries with no digitized images. Citations in someone else's published research that you've never traced to the original. That list is your email queue. For each item on that list, use the Perplexity research step first. Ask which archive holds the record, what the correct contact email is, and whether any of those records are already viewable online for free. You might find the records are there waiting and save yourself the email entirely. When you do write, run the ChatGPT brainstorm step before drafting a word. Think through what you're asking for and why. Then bring that strategic clarity to Claude for the actual email. And for foreign archives, use the language. That German email, that Italian email, that Polish email you've been putting off for 2 years? 15 minutes with a well-constructed Claude prompt and you have something professional enough to send tonight. The language barrier is lower than it has ever been. The archive is still there. The email address is there. The only thing standing between you and those records is the email you haven't sent yet. And for my Australian and UK listeners, everything we covered today applies directly to your research. Australian researchers tracing ancestors from Germany, Italy, or Poland can use the exact same AI-assisted approach to find archive emails and draft correspondence in the right language. For UK listeners, if you're researching Irish Catholic ancestry before 1864, when Irish civil registration began, you're in the same position as the Carl Vogel scenario. Pre-civil registration records live in diocesan archives. Resources like irishgenealogy.ie have digitized significant collections, but for records not yet online, the email approach we walked through today works exactly the same way, in English in this case. Thank you so much for listening to Ancestors and Algorithms. If this episode showed you a path to records you've been stuck on, please leave a review wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you know a fellow genealogist who's been sitting on an index entry for months without knowing what to do next, share this episode with them. That's the best way to help our community grow. For my Patreon members, the companion guide for this episode includes 12 advanced prompts and a complete email template library covering U.S. courthouse requests, NARA requests, and foreign archive correspondence in German, Italian, French, and Polish, each with subject line examples and field by field instructions. If you've been thinking about joining, I host monthly live Q&A sessions on YouTube exclusively for members. Head over to ancestorsandai.com to learn more. For everything you need, including every episode, our private Facebook community, companion guides, and the research lab, head over to ancestorsandai.com. It's all right there waiting for you. I'm your host, Brian, and I will see you next week for another journey into the past powered by the future. Until then, happy researching.